Our Browns 2024 opponent preview continues with the Raiders. We enter week 4. How did the Browns stack up? What are their chances? And a little fantasy football look at what the Raiders bring to the table as well. Let's kick it off right now on the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara. The sickest Cleveland Browns podcast.
Chubb runs, he's to the 10, 15, he's to the 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. There goes Chubb, he's to the 30, 20, 10, 5, touchdown, Shabba-lubba hub.
It's gonna be sick.
Welcome, everybody. How are you enjoying the offseason? Summertime, there is pretty much no news, which can be good, right? Which is good. You don't want players getting in trouble and running around and all that, but it is a dry stretch of news for the National Football League. That's okay. That's okay, because that's why we're doing our opponent by opponent, week by week, Browns 2024 preview. Through the first 3 weeks, I have the Browns at 3-0. Let's see if that continues. Week 4, they head out to Las Vegas. Feels like it could be a trap game against the Raiders. So I want to learn a bit more about this Raiders team. What they're at. They got a new coach full-time, right? You got Aiden O'Connell floating around. The Minshew man, the mustached wonder, Gardner Minshew's there. What did they look like? What are their chances in their division and against the Browns coming up in week 4? So when you talk Raiders, you go to one guy only, people, okay? And that's to my buddy. It's been a while. Mitchell Renz from the Raiders Report on Chat Sports. Mitch, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good. You said Minshew Mania, the mustache, so I know I had to bring it today, man. So appreciate the invite, man. It's been far too long.
Yes.
For those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Mitchell Renz. I'm host of the Raiders Report. We have a little over 170,000 subscribers on YouTube. Our company's called Chat Sports, which you can check out a bunch of the content that we make over there. And if anybody wants to follow me from this for more mustache tips, at Mitchell Renz 365.
We don't know if he's wearing jorts or not. You have to subscribe to his channel to find that out. That's a tease in the business. Yes.
There you go. If anybody wants to see my Nick Chubb, hit me up.
And I have to, even if you're not a Raiders fan, the content you put out is just entertaining overall. So make sure you subscribe and follow Mitchell Renz there on social media and the channel. Now, Mitch, I wanted to come out of the gate with a hard-hitting question for you, okay? We ask the tough questions here on the Sick Podcast. And I have to ask you, which is grosser? Mark Davis and his 26-year-old girlfriend being pregnant, or Bill Belichick dating the 24-year-old? Which is grosser in today's NFL?
Well, only one is true. So one of them, I'm going to go with Bill Belichick. With the other story with Mark, it's actually not his girlfriend, and it's also not his baby. It's Joey Gallo's baby.
Whoa!
So, yeah, it's Mark. They were just spotted next to each other at a game. I forget which game it was, but according to her and according to I guess Mari, not Mari himself, but it's not Mark's baby.
That is good news for anyone who wants to keep their food down. So that's great. That's good.
But I mean, no disrespect to Mark Davis, but Bill Belichick is a far more attractive human being than Davis.
Yes, he looks like Bill Belichick. Just looks like a grumpy, generic old man. Mark Davis is an unfunny Muppet.
I mean, I gotta say this though, Mr. Davis. He watches our show. He's a good supporter of what we do, and he's a lot more humble and a lot more nice in person. I can't imagine. I hope one day you and I are both lucky enough to have $1 billion and a football team. So, but I hear you, man.
Yeah, I listen. People, give me $1 billion, say whatever you want about me. Not a problem. Not an issue. Say what you like. No problem. Okay, let's get into this Raiders team, because this is one of the more intriguing journeys over the last years of the football team. We know they're in one of the toughest divisions, at least to win, with the Kansas City Chiefs in there. But the team itself, you had that coaching change and the players coach, and now you have Aiden O'Connell. You bring in Minshew. Is O'Connell the guy? Like, there's just a lot of moving pieces here. Let's start on offense at that quarterback spot. What are we to make of Aiden O'Connell?
I think Aiden is a really good backup, and I think a lot of Raider fans will get mad at me for saying this, but to me, Gardner Minshew is going to be the starting quarterback. Like, To me, actions speak louder than words. And the Raiders this offseason, you gave Gardner Minshew, it's not a lot of money, but $15 million guaranteed, 2-year, $25 million contract. And then on top of that, if you're going to bring in a guy like Minshew, who they made a priority, and the reason why that I know that they made him a priority is they signed him instantly after Christian Wilkins. After that, the Raiders went pretty silent. Like, they spent their money on Wilkins, they spent their money on Gardner Minshew on the exact same day. And then, they didn't do too much. They invested in their defensive line. They invested in their offensive line. They're going to try to beat you up in the trenches where, it's kind of like what Cleveland does. Like, you're going to play Cleveland for 4 quarters, 17 games. Like, it's a daunting task. For quarterbacks, though, like, if you're going to be Antonio Pierce, if you're going to be Tom Telesco, and if you're going to call the Washington Commanders asking, hey, what does it cost to go up and get number 2 to go get Jaden Daniels? You don't do all those things if you're 100% confident in Aiden. Now, like, I do know this. The organization loves O'Connell. The players love Aiden. He switched his number up to number 12, so people are fired up about that because Brady's now here. But, like, I'll say this. He is, to me, going to be a QB that has a very good career, not as a starter. I've compared him to, like, a guy like Brian Hoyer, where he might be in the NFL for 14, 15 years. He's a brilliant, brilliant guy. Just when it comes down to having, like, those tools to get it done, it's not really going to happen. For Gardner, though, he's also a gamer. They got to learn a brand new offense in Luke Getsy. And all reports out of minicamp and OTAs were that the Raiders' offense looked really bad and the quarterback struggled. So we'll see. They could be learning a new offense. It could be, I'm not afraid to say it, I think the Raiders have the best defense in the NFL.
Well, that Wilkins signing turned everyone's head. That's like, I have to say this. You don't make a signing like that. Now, it might not translate to success, but you don't make a signing like that if you are trying to bottom out for the first overall pick next year. That's a big-time signing. And you're right. We've seen, like, Gardner Minshew do well for stretches. He's won games. Like, he can take you to a point
better numbers
where you
than Trevor Lawrence. He's got better numbers than Trevor Lawrence in his first 50 games, right? Like, if Vegas, if Trevor Lawrence was the quarterback of the Raiders, I think their win-loss over-under would probably be like 10.5. It's at 6.5 right now, which is totally fine with me. I mean, I've made multiple videos that I've said, you better bet your house on 6.5 over-under because the Raiders are hitting that. If you can win 8 games with Josh McDaniels and McDaniels to me, it was kind of, again, very different. I'm friends with Hugh Jackson. I know one of my buddies has a podcast with him down here. Random story. Hugh doesn't think that what happened to him in Cleveland was his fault, right? Which is what every coach says.
We've heard that, yeah.
I'm sure McDaniels will say the exact same thing. But think about, like, the culture, like, flip instantly when Hugh kind of left and then with McDaniels left. The Raiders, they feel like they almost got, like, this cancer out of their organization. And all those players, they're fired up to be there. I mean, they didn't have a single player miss OTAs. They didn't have a single guy miss minicamp. Hell, they had veterans showing up for rookie mandatory minicamp in early May. This team, they're fired up to play for Antonio Pierce, and they're going to be punching some teams in the mouth this year. They're going to be playing old school Raider football.
Well, what about Davante Adams? Because when it comes to fantasy football too, Mitch, we know Davante Adams in the past, his Green Bay days, right at the top of the pile. We mentioned the quarterback issues. And we also know that wide receivers, especially the star ones, can be, quite divas and get disgruntled easily. What should we make of Davante Adams? Maybe from a production side? Like, if I'm looking to draft Davante Adams, how confident should I be?
I think I saw Davante the other day in a draft. It was like the 18th receiver or something crazy off the board. And, unfortunately, Tay's not going to be the guy that he was back with Aaron Rodgers just because, Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell aren't those dudes. Yep. But, like, in a PPR league, I do think that he holds a lot more value. And I could see him yet again getting another season where he has over 100 catches, probably going to have close to 1,250 yards. I do think that this offense is going to be better with Jacoby Myers. Brock Bowers is, according to all reports, an absolute freaking stud, which he truly is. But then the other thing that, the fantasy community really isn't, I think, paying all that much attention to is Davante was one of the big guys to get Luke Getsy, his old OC quarterback coach from Green Bay, to Las Vegas. And, a lot of the reports have been like, that Devontae already kind of understands this offense and he's trying to get everybody well acclimated. And it could just be one of those little extra things where it's 3rd down and 5, or you're in a tough situation. Who's the guy that I'm going to go to? I'm going to go to my safety blanket, Devontae, where I would be shocked if he doesn't have over 100 catches. It's just the yards and the touchdowns might be a little bit hard to predict. I'm not going to go crazy and say he's going to have like years like where Julio Jones was putting up crazy numbers, but Julio Jones a few years ago, you were like, I know what I'm getting. He's just not going to find the end zone all that often.
Right. So I like that strategy. PPR wise, Devontae Adams, you might be able to get him at a value because of the quarterback situation there.
Yeah.
Now you talked about Brock Bowers, and it was a curious. Now we understand the talent, but it was a curious draft pick, as you know, because you got Michael Mayer, who was a really good tight end the previous year. And I wasn't as down about it because it's like, okay, well, there are things called 2 tight ends. You can have both of them on the field. You can strategize. Are we looking at more Bowers, more Mayer, both on the field at the same time? Like what type of offense are we looking at?
Yeah, I actually think Brock Bowers could be a sneaky, like, I don't know how to explain it exactly, but he's going to play more wide receiver than he does tight end. So when he was at Georgia, he lined up out of the slot about 52, 53% of the time. And the way that the Raiders are really going to, I think, confuse some people is they are going to do a lot of 2 tight end sets, a lot of 12 personnel. But, like, I actually think Michael Mayer ends up being the tight end, running more tight end snaps, hand in the dirt. Now, he also lost 10 pounds. He's running a lot faster. And, he was definitely motivated when the Bowers pick happened. But to me, Raider fans for a long time, they fell in love with Hunter Renfrow. For what the Raiders did, they kind of hit that upgrade button with Renfrow. They go out, they draft Brock Bowers, who's going to be their predominant slot receiver. And then they're also going to kind of use him the way that the 49ers use Kyle Juszczyk as like a fullback and like the H-back role. So like he did that 10% of the time at Georgia. He's a hell of a blocker as well. Bowers can run a bunch of different things. I just think like from a target standpoint, Devontae is going to lead the team in targets. Then it's going to be Jacoby Myers. Really, really close there is going to be Brock Bowers. But there's not too often can you put a wide receiver in your tight end position. So if anybody out there is like, hey, man, I need to take a flyer on a tight end late in the round, I do think Bowers works out. With the Raiders also, their new offensive line, they're going to go with like a wide zone scheme, which is kind of like typical with like what Shanahan has done, very typical with like what Mike McDaniel has done down there in Miami. So James Craig's the Raiders' new offensive line coach. So when you look at the offense of the 49ers, think of Kyle Juszczyk mixed with George Kittle. That's how they're going to use Bowers.
Interesting. That's an interesting. And you mentioned the Hunter Renfrow. Well, maybe not quite as quick, but you upgrade to a 6'4" guy who can just run through you.
I mean, Bowers is, and I've said this before, he's 21 years old. He was arguably the best player on Georgia the last 3 years. A team that, I mean, let's face it, I know Michigan won the Natty last year, but you ask, I think, most college football fans, who was the best college football team the last 3 years, people are probably going to say Georgia. Yeah. He was the best player on that team on offense. And I'm a big, sucker where there are certain minds in the NFL that I respect. Kyle Shanahan, one of those minds. A guy like Sean McVay, one of those minds. And Sean McVay was going to trade up about 9 spots to hop over the Raiders and take Brock Bowers. There's phone calls, there's, reports, videos of them going to do it. And they're like, no, I think he might fall to us. And then the Raiders ended up taking him. Like, Bowers is their guy. He is I'm telling you, he's a freak of nature. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to put up 60, 70 catches in year one, because tight end's pretty difficult new position to learn in the NFL. But there's no reason to me why he can't be around 50 grabs, 650, 700 yards, and 4 or 5 touchdowns. Well,
and look, Sam Laporta did it last year. There's a recent precedent where maybe, and it could be a lot, but maybe we're getting away from the old mindset of, all right, well, it takes till you're 27 to be a true tight end. Maybe if you do use them properly in more of a wide receiver style, you can be effective quickly. Maybe Bowers does that. It's a la Sam Laporta. I
mean, let's face it. Brock Bowers looks like somebody that should be doing your taxes. And if he didn't look like that, if he looked like Kyle Pitts, let's have an honest conversation. When Kyle Pitts first came out, he was in Atlanta. Everyone's like, this guy is a freak of nature. And he is outrageous. Freak of nature. Bowers is right up there from an athletic standpoint. He's got everything you look for. It's just he looks like he could do your taxes.
He looks like he could do your taxes. In conversation with Mitchell Renz from the Raiders Report on Chat Sports, talking Raiders versus Browns Week 4 and what we should expect out of this. Now, the running back position, this is full committee. I'm not interested in at fantasy at all. I like Zamir White, but I like him better as a compliment. I like Alexander Madison, but I like him better as a compliment. Amir Abdullah seems like he's been around forever. So is this just like all right, we're gonna, trot a couple guys out, keep them fresh, and just kind of go committee?
They are probably going to go with committee. Tom Telesco back in March said that he believes in going with the 2-3 running back system. That was before Josh Jacobs signed his 4-year, $48 million contract with the Green Bay Packers. So, there were still kind of discussions whether or not they were going to do something like that. But this has been a guy who his entire career has believed in the idea of going by committee. But Zamir White, I do think, could be a sneaky guy. I think he's going off the board right now as RB in the 20s. And if you look at what he did the final 4 weeks of last season, if you take those numbers, and I love to do this, you take those 4 numbers from the final 4 weeks of last season and you apply them to a 17-game sample size, he would have had over 300 carries, close to over 1,600 yards, only 4 touchdowns. But they really relied on Zamir, and Zeus is one of the reasons why they said, all right, Josh, we're going to let you go. You're going to walk away. They like Madison. He's one of the better pass blocking running backs in the NFL, right. And I think that's going to be one of the areas that he gets used a little bit more. But to me, Zamir White's probably going to be 900 yards, probably 8 touchdowns. The sneaky guy that I think NFL communities, especially dynasty people, need to consider is Dylan Laube, the running back that they drafted out of the 6th round out of New Hampshire. They love him. The amount, I always say on my show, where there's smoke, there's fire, and the amount of smoke that there's been around Laube, it kind of reminds me of the first year I was covering the Raiders when, everyone was like, dude, this Max Crosby guy is insane. And then, the reports were like, dude, this Darren Waller guy, he's a little bit different. You're kind of seeing reports around Trey Tucker like that, but then also Laube. I'll admit Laube might get a little bit more work in the kick return and punt return game, but from an athletic standpoint, people don't know about him because he was a running back out of New Hampshire. I legitimately think the more and more people see him how he plays, because Telesco has a lot of experience with, smaller running backs. Austin Eckler is an interesting back to think about. And I don't want to put this Austin Eckler or he wears number 23, so everyone's like, oh, he's going to be Christian McCaffrey because he's a white running back. I'm like, no, that's too much. The running back that I think the way that Telesco is going to want to use Laube is the way he used this guy with the Chargers, Danny Woodhead, where it was you could see a running back that gets 40, 50 catches a season and then just doesn't do anything from there on out. Amir Abdullah, I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. If you want to draft a running back in PPR league on the Raiders, his name's Dylan Laube.
And especially for Dynasty, like you say, because Abdullah, you can scrap for next year. That's a kind of a fill-in guy, right?
He might not even make the team. I think Laube takes his spot.
Could take his spot. Madison, who knows, so I like that. Okay. And then we look at the defense, and you mentioned it. Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins. You look at that D-line, just those 2 guys. And then the rest is pretty solid.
I always get into a debate. We got a Browns guy at Chat Sports, and we always kind of get into the debate because I always say that I think that the Raiders have the best defensive line in the NFL with Max Crosby. I think he's better than Myles Garrett. I got the numbers to prove it. Then you had a guy like Christian Wilkins who, and continuity is just one of those things that, again, it just gets overlooked. And Patrick Graham, he used to be the defensive coordinator down in Miami, okay? The same year that they drafted Wilkins in the 1st round. Rob Leonard, defensive line coach for the Raiders now, used to be the defensive line coach in Miami in 2020 and in 2021. So what did the Raiders do? They brought in Adam Butler from Miami. They re-signed John Jenkins. Now you have Christian Wilkins. Those 3 guys have been working together for a long time. And again, it's, the little things. I think Malcolm Kuntz is going to take another step. He had 8 sacks in the final 9 games when Antonio Pierce took over. And when you look at the entire season, it's not fair. But when you look at the final 9 games when Antonio Pierce took over this Las Vegas Raiders team, they are a trap team. They were 3-1 against the AFC West. You've heard Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce say, hey, man, when we played the Raiders, it kind of woke us up. Think about a game that Aiden O'Connell did not complete a pass in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th quarter, and the Raiders beat the Chiefs. Their defense was playing at such a high level that, you just don't even understand how good they were playing. They were giving up 16 points per game with Antonio Pierce. That's best in the NFL.
Wow.
Then They also spent the second least amount of money on defense last offseason because McDaniels wanted to spend all the money on the offense. So this offseason, the Raiders spent big on Christian Wilkins. And Tyree Wilson is another player that there's a lot of smoke around him. He's bigger than Max Crosby. He was the pick that they had number 7 overall. They didn't anticipate him to play last season, but because Chandler Jones went, he kind of had to be put into a situation where he wasn't 100% healthy. And I know Tyree. I've seen him down here in Dallas. I live in Dallas, Texas, and ran into him a few times. He is much bigger. When I tell you much bigger than Max Crosby, he is much, much bigger than Max Crosby.
Really?
And he's motivated, interior defensive lineman. I think the Raiders could have 60 sacks this season, legitimately.
Boy, especially that gives you rotation help too, right? Keep guys fresh. You have a stud like that.
John Jenkins is a sneaky player, and again, the reason why I think Crosby's the best in the NFL, back-to-back seasons, number 1 run defender according to PFF. Nobody has had more tackles for losses than Crosby over the past 2 seasons. And one of my favorite stats, and I think Browns fans will appreciate this one. So I got to give credit to my buddy Tristan. So listen to this. Over the last 2 seasons, teams ran towards Max Crosby just 9.8% of the time, okay? That's the lowest in the NFL among all edge rushers. Myles Garrett at 19.9% was the second closest. So think about how much teams respect Myles Garrett, okay?
Jeez.
Then you think about what Crosby's doing, and then on top of that, Crosby has led the NFL in tackles for losses over the past 2 seasons. Right. The reason why Max doesn't get any credit, sacks are important. But to me, he also leads the NFL in QB pressures over the last 3 seasons. Not close. Total snaps played, Max Crosby, not close. Tackles, Max Crosby from the defensive end. It's not close. And now he's finally going to get some help. Not too long ago, the Raiders had a season where they had combined 13 sacks as a team. That's not long ago.
Wow.
When I tell you that he hasn't had a lot of talent around him, it's not an understatement.
No. And now when you put Wilkins with him. And again, you mentioned in that Tyree Wilson. That's, I just hope the Raiders haven't found their groove week 4 when they play the Browns, because now I'm starting to get a little nervous here. I got to tell you, too,
the Browns are a tough team.
I like Tommy Eichenberg out of Ohio State. He's not going to be a 15 sack guy in his career. That is a steady, nice mid-round pick that you can plug in on a rotation for 8 years and be just fine. So I like that Eichenberg pick out of Ohio State.
They did that one. They loved the signing that they had in Robert Spillane. So I got one of my really good buddies at the Raiders was when they saw the tape on Eichenberg and they heard everything that coaches and everybody else said about him, where it's I think far too often in the offseason people fall in love with these athletic freaks, and I get it. It's the underwear Olympics, all in that. But then there's also Tommy Eichenberg might not be the greatest athlete, but there is always that saying, he's always near the football. You know what I mean? He was just always near the football. And Robert Spillane last season for the Raiders had one of the best seasons at linebacker I've seen for a while. He had 148 tackles, 3 interceptions. It was really, really solid. I believe the highest graded coverage linebacker according to PFF. So what the Raiders did, they were all right, we found this linebacker that can fit really well in Patrick Graham's system. And now we're going to find a guy in college in Tommy Eichenberg and see if we can duplicate it.
I'm seeing, too, you got the old Brown Harrison Bryant, third on the tight end depth chart.
And that's the other thing. Raiders are going to run a lot of 12 personnel, where I love the Harrison Bryant pickup. And I've said it before, he might not always show up in the stat sheet, but the year I fell in love with Harrison Bryant was back in 2019, coming out of FAU, won the best tight end award. I forget what the hell it's called.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of that, too. Yeah, he won that,
And, took Austin Hooper's spot, took David Njoku, not spot, but I remember in that year, nobody ever thought Harrison Bryant would find his way on the field.
Cooper sucked that year. It was terrible.
Yeah. And, but, the Raiders, they had Austin Hooper last season. They let him go. They let him walk. They bring in Harrison Bryant. And what Bryant's going to do is, again, he's just a really good effing blocker. He's going to help you out in the red zone. And for the Raiders, they legitimately can line up with Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, Harrison Bryant, kick out Devontae Adams, and then you got to make a decision. You know what I mean? Am I going to go one-on-one with Devontae? Because if I go one-on-one with Devontae as a quarterback, I like that matchup. If you go 2 with Devontae, then that means the Raiders are going, well, I'm going to play the numbers game. We got 10, you're going up against 9, and we're going to try to run it down your throat. So, the Raiders are going to do a lot of 12 personnel. They're going to run a lot of the offense. you saw with Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski, because to me, Brock Bowers, and I got to give a shout out to my guy Tom Downey. I think he's one of the best NFL draft analysts in the game. And one of the notes that he had on Bowers, which I'll never forget, was Brock Bowers is Aaron Hernandez minus the murder. And but that's how good of an athlete Brock Bowers is.
Yeah. And hey, Harrison Bryant too. Don't be surprised if you see him under center for some QB sneaks. He did that a bunch with the Browns. Nice sneak, he's one of those guys. He'll get the first down. He's not going to go with a lot of yak, but nice, solid player. So I like that pickup there. Let me ask you this before.
Football player.
I like him. Before we hit the road here, I want to ask you your opinion and what to expect on the new kickoff rule. I'm excited to see it in play. I think it could just be absolutely wild what we see with the two players back and possible reverses. I haven't been this excited about special teams since Phil Dawson kicked in the Snow Bowl game for the Browns in 2008. It seems like it could. What do you think of it?
So I've had the opportunity to speak to a few of the players, and Raiders special teams coach Tom McMahon has kind of really said that they're putting a big emphasis towards it this year. So for a team, I don't know who's the Browns kicker, Santos.
No, we got Dustin Hopkins.
Yeah, sorry. But he was talking a lot about from the kicking standpoint, having a kicker that can accurately kick between the 1 and the 20, put some air under it. That's going to be a really big thing. Another thing that I know the Raiders are going to do is for the new special teams rules, they're going to treat it almost like running the football. So that's why I think one of the reasons why Dylan Laube could be back there, Amir Abdul, I think that's why he was re-signed. But it's teams, this is just based off of what I've been told, teams are evaluating it more of when the person catches the ball, the blocking and everything else around him is a lot closer to running the football, in a play action sense compared to the old kick return rules. And because of that, teams want to have a lot more linebackers and also have a lot more. For the Raiders, they wanted to have long, lanky corners essentially to be able to play special teams. So they went out and they drafted, his name's DeCamerion Richardson, also a kid by the name of MJ Devonshire, who were both long, lanky, athletic freaks at corner. Maybe not the best technique defensive-wise, but I do think what you're going to see a lot of teams do is they might end up keeping that extra special teams guy, whether it's a receiver, a running back, whoever, to be able to just – because people are nervous about the new kick return rules because they don't know how it's going to go. And you're hoping that you get back to guys actually returning the football because it's been totally lost.
Oh, yeah. Well, Brown's special teams coordinator, Bubba Ventrone, was saying he's expecting it more instead of having the zippy guys get down there. Yeah, you're building more linebackers. You're having it more as a football play. And I'm sure you heard this too from the Kansas City Chiefs. They're even thinking of toying with the idea of having one of their safeties kick, because you don't need the booming leg, kick to place, and then you have an extra tackler back there because the kickers are going to be expected potentially to be more involved, which can be a disaster. So if you have that type of wrinkle in it, this could get just out of hand in all sorts of entertaining ways.
Yeah, one of my buddies who's pretty well connected with Kansas City literally told me something very similar to what you just said there, but it's also one of the reasons why they signed that kid he was the rugby player, which I can't think of his name. So one of my guys that's very well connected with Kansas City told me that their coaching staff looked at the new kickoff return rules as very close to rugby style football. So what's one of the reasons why they went and got him.
Interesting. Yeah, it's who
I can't think of his name.
Yeah, I'm trying to look.
Chiefs rugby player. I'm sure if you Googled it would pop
up. It'd be something. Look it up, people. Let us know. Hit us up in the comment section. Let us know who the guy is. But it's going to be each team's going to have its own twists on it, so it's going to be fascinating. All right, prediction. Way too early. Not going to hold you to it. But week 4, Browns coming in. I have them at 3-0, coming in hot. I think this could be a trap game. You're coming into Vegas, glitz, glamour, beautiful stadium, and all that. I have this as a loss for the Browns, because of, again, that sort of possibly trap game in that early part of the season. How do you see this one early on playing out?
I mean, I'll say if the Browns and Raiders were to play 10 times, I'd pick the Browns to win 6 out of those 10. When I did, so in the offseason, I mean, it's slow. We do Madden simulations. So we did a Madden simulation with this game, and Nick Chubb just absolutely destroyed us. And I forget what the game was, but the Browns ended up winning. when I did my official prediction, I also had the Browns winning that game. I think it was like 24-23. But like the Browns and Raiders are going to play very, very similar football, where I know Cleveland has Deshaun Watson, but like I'm really hoping Chubb is healthy because he's one of my favorite running backs in the NFL.
Yeah, me too.
But they're going to try to beat you up physically. The only thing that scares me with the Raiders is the following week they play the Denver Broncos, a division rival. And sometimes with young teams, new head coach, you kind of like look by the Browns and because you're concentrating on Denver. But like, I want the Raiders to win this game. I'm just being honest. I did pick the Browns to win it. Like if I was to bet my own money, but like I said, six out of 10 times I'd probably pick Cleveland. But the Raiders and the Browns are going to be two teams that are. I think the Raiders are a lot closer to 9 to 10 wins than they are 6 to 5.
I think I would take that over as well. And the word is right now, nothing official, but it seems like Chubb won't be available likely until end of October, early November. That's kind of the word right now. The guy, if anybody can make it back early, he's a freak. He's an absolute freak, but we'll see. The Browns they're kind of committee mode too without Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford, Donta Foreman, Naheem Hines working in there a little bit. So we'll see how that plays out. But Mitchell, tell people where they can find you. And again, even if you're not a Raiders fan, the content, I watch it. It's very entertaining regardless. So tell them where they can find you.
You guys can hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, at MitchellRenz365. And, if you're watching the Raiders and Browns game come week 4, tune on YouTube, have the Raiders report on. We'll do a watch party. We'll be able to break it down. Usually we get 100, 200,000 fans will be watching. It's pretty crazy time live on YouTube. But we do a lot of fun content. We're also not afraid to throw a few beer bongs back while we're doing it. So we're pretty fratty over at Chat Sports. I'm not going to lie, but we're also going to have a good time. I like to think of all the content that we make at Chat Sports and at the Raiders Report is like, you and your friends sitting down, watching a game at a bar, having a few drinks, and talking a little football. So that's what it's about.
Love it, buddy. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. We'll do it again soon.
See you, bro.
There he goes. Mitchell Renz from the Raiders Report on Chat Sports. Always good. Much too long between times I've been able to chat with Mitch. Great guy. Very, very knowledgeable and tuned in. Interesting. I want to know, what do you think? Browns versus Raiders week 4. Mitch has the Browns winning. I said it could be a trap game for the Browns. I think they do match up that defense. It could be a low-scoring game. And just like the Browns, the question could come down to quarterback, right? If it's Gardner Minshew, we've seen Minshew took the Browns right to the edge when it was versus the Colts last year, right? It took Myles Garrett hopping over, leapfrog, swatting down that kick. It came right to the edge. Gardner Minshew, he can beat you. He can jump up and beat you. And Aiden O'Connell, low back, still some raw talent and high-end backup can come in. So is it defense? Who's clicking at that point in the year? What do you think? Leave a comment, subscribe, notifications on, click like on social media, on Twitter, X, at SickPodBrowns, at AndyMC81, Instagram and TikTok, at AndyMCSports. Make sure you check out, too, at SickPodBrowns. Pinned is the team shop. It's the show shop. Fantasy football is a wicked professional fantasy football player shirt. If you're a fantasy champion, as a crown fantasy champ, lots of cool Browns and Ohio State gear there as well. So check that out. Thank you so much to Mitchell. Thank you to producer Jimmy and to all of you. You've been watching the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara. And as always, go Browns!
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.